Think of Scotland, and images of castles, glens, lochs, and tartan-clad Highlanders all spring instantly to mind, accompanied by the unmistakable, haunting strain of the bagpipes. Cliché it may be, but brave heroes such as William Wallace and the regal Robert the Bruce run riot through the pages of Scottish history, inspiring countless modern-day admirers to stand firm and be counted for what they believe in. Yet, Scotland has had a turbulent past, and the people of this independent nation have at times suffered great hardship in a battle simply to survive. But they do say that necessity is the mother of invention, and this perhaps explains a great Scottish phenomenon. Scotch whisky is known the whole world over for its reviving and heartening properties, and when the secret of its distillation was first discovered, the resulting fiery brew certainly added an extra dimension to the national character. In a wild, rugged landscape, battered by wind and rain, and through centuries past threatened constantly by invaders from both land and sea, a wee dram of Scotch whisky was always a tonic for body and soul. Today, though, there are few rampaging armies to trouble the native Scot, but the weather's certainly not improved any, and the landscape is as inhospitable as ever. So there's still plenty of opportunity to appreciate a measure of whisky in authentic Scottish style. First things first, how did the Scots discover that such simple elements as grain and water could be turned into a wonderfully rich, intoxicating brew? In truth, no one is altogether sure, but there are a few theories worthy of mention. If you travel to Ireland, literally only 16 miles from Scotland and places across the Irish Sea, you'll discover that they claim to have been the first to create Ishkabah, the Gaelic word for whisky, literally meaning the water of life. On a worldwide scale, Irish whisky is less well known than its Scottish cousin, and we'll look at the differences between the two types in just a little while. But the learned monks of old Ireland are the most likely originators of whisky. Not only were they well educated, they also travelled the world, and it's thought that while visiting the Far East, they saw perfume being distilled in alembics, wonderful copper creations that were definitely the forerunner of the pot stills that you'll find in whisky distilleries to this day. Returning home, the wise men of God applied the principles of distillation to making spirit for drinking rather than wearing, and the whisky industry was born. When the Irish monks travelled to Scotland, from as early as the 6th century, it was with the sole purpose of converting the wild heathens of northern Britain to Christianity. Although the Scots were not necessarily all that keen on the religion being preached to them, they were certainly rather more interested in the missionaries' knowledge of distillation and concentrated diligently on learning how to make whisky. There is, however, a far more romantic notion of how the brew came about in Scotland. which does rob the Irish of the credit that they most probably deserve. Ancient Scots travelled great distances, herding their cattle and merrily reboiling their oatmeal porridge, as everyone knows a traditional Scottish breakfast necessity, wherever they went. It's said that it was through this thrifty culinary recycling that distillation was accidentally discovered, with the potent porridge mix triggering the whole Scotch whisky making process. There are undoubtedly elements of truth in each claim, but aqua vitae makes its first official appearance in the Scottish history books in 1494, when Friar John Corr purchased malt to make the spirit. However, by the time it appears again in 1618, at the funeral and wake of a Highland chieftain, the name of the spirit had changed to Ishka, which was to be steadily anglicised over the centuries to become whisky. By the 1600s, whisky making in Scotland was a popular practice, but it certainly had its dangers. Barley was the main ingredient, and it was plentiful across the land. A good water supply was also crucial, and, as you'll see if you travel to Scotland today, there's never any shortage in that department. Soaking a sack of barley in the running waters of a cool mountain stream would get the process instigated before the grain was dried out and germination encouraged to begin. The next raw ingredient required was peat, again a widely available Scottish commodity, so that a smoky fire could be used to halt germination and complete the malting of the barley. The addition then of water and yeast would create a liquid more akin to beer, which could then be passed twice through a pot still to refine the alcohol. This could all be done in a croft kitchen with the most basic of home constructed equipment, but handling the completed fiery brew was at times a life-threatening business. Most people have heard the expression calling the shots, which means in modern usage taking charge of any given situation by making decisions. But it actually originates from this critical part of the whisky making process. The shots refer to the liquid coming from the still after distillation, and the first produce, or foreshots as they were known, were very poisonous indeed. Without any of the technology that we have to assist today, it was a tough call to decide exactly when the flowing whisky was actually drinkable, and matters were complicated still further as the aftershots became weak and pretty unpleasant to drink. Judging the alcohol content was a bit hit and miss, but igniting the brew with gunpowder usually gave a good, if somewhat dramatic, indication as to the whisky's strength. However, it took a brave soul to set a match to the concoction, as the explosions could be rather violent if the whisky was a wee bit too strong. Throughout the history of the British Isles, there has always been considerable argument over the sovereignty of Scotland, and to this day, the Scottish people's right to self-determination is still a major political issue. But this really caused great friction back in the 17th century, when the government in London decided it would be a great idea to put a tax on whisky, much to the horror of the native Scots. It was an insult to everything they held dear, and when the Union of the Parliaments in 1707 allowed English revenue officers to cross the border to sniff out any illegal stills, matters deteriorated at an alarming rate. Now, thanks historically to the territorial antics of any number of English monarchs, the Scottish tradition of hating their neighbours south of Hadrian's Wall was relished with a passion, and when the English started to target the Scots' beloved national drink, the hatred understandably escalated. It became the bounden duty of every true Scotsman to make illicit whisky, to strike a blow against English domination, and any probing customs man literally took his life in his hands as he went about his business. Nevertheless, taxation and licensing had become an intrinsic part of the whisky industry, and over the years it gradually steadied and stabilised, regulating the fine distilling companies that are still in production to this day. But there's not a Scotch whisky lover in the world who could stand here and look at this evocative landscape without dreaming of hidden stills continually bubbling away, producing hitherto undiscovered whiskies to thrill and delight the appreciative palate. Before going any further, this is a very good moment to address the differences between Scotch and Irish whiskies, because historically speaking they followed similar paths in their development, most notably in their resistance to taxation. The customs men from England were as much the scourge of the Irish distillers as they were the Scots, but the Irish did, at least, have the advantage of a stretch of water between them and their persecutors from London. The first thing that you'll notice if you stand a bottle of Irish whiskey next to the Scottish version is an extra E in the spelling. However, you will need to taste the whiskies to spot the other differences. In Scotland, as you've already heard, peat has always been a vital ingredient in the whisky making process, and you will detect the smoky flavour of it in the finished drink. Surprisingly, the Irish don't use peat in their whisky production, despite the fact that the Emerald Isle is so richly endowed with this wonderful natural resource. Instead, the Irish kilns are filled with warm air rather than peat-laden smoke, resulting in a finished whisky with no trace of peatiness. This of course makes for a more subtly flavoured spirit, and the distillation process also contributes to the smoothness of the whisky. In any Irish distillery, you will notice 3 types of pot still, rather than the 2 used by their Scottish counterparts. This is because the Scots only distill their whisky twice, and the Irish continue refining their whisky with a 3rd distillation. For the modern day whisky drinker, perhaps the most famous Irish brand is Jameson, and if you travel to Dublin you can actually visit the Bow Street distillery from where this great whisky first came. Yet you won't be long inside the door before you discover a strong Scottish ancestral heritage. The Irish might have first taken the magical secret of whisky distillation to Scotland, but it took a native Scot to apply his own interpretation and bring it right back again. The Scottish-born founder of this company, John Jameson, arrived in Dublin in the late 1700s to set up his whisky-making business. His pedigree was exemplary, with links to many of the great Scottish distillers, and his wife Margaret belonged to the Hague family, a well-respected whisky dynasty back then, and a fine blend still in production to this day. Interestingly, Jameson has developed an even stronger international reputation, as it is the flagship brand of the Irish Distillers Group, which is now owned by the French drinks giant Pernod Ricard. However, fascinating as the Irish connections may be, that, as they say, is another story entirely, and the great whiskies of Scotland are what this particular programme is actually about. What's more, we've had quite enough history to be going on with, and it's time to get down to business.
By yon bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright, oh Loch Lomond, where me and my true love were ever one to gay, on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. So you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. 'Twas there that we parted on yon shady glen, on the steep, steep side of Ben Lomond, where in the purple hue the Highland hills we view, and the moon coming out in the gloaming. So you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Well, the wee birdies sing and the wildflowers spring, and the sunshine, the waters are sleeping, but the broken-hearted kens need a second spring, though the water may cease frae the greeting, the water may cease frae the greeting. So you take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. By yon bonny, bonny banks and by yon bonny braes, where the sun shines bright on Loch Lomond, where me and my true love were ever meant to gay, on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. So you take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. Where me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
You might be surprised to discover that not all Scotch whisky is the same, and the different types you can buy depend not only upon how the whisky is made, but the region from which it originates will also characterise the nature of the spirit. For example, a blended Scotch has a very different character from a Speyside single malt, and an Islay distillery, open to sea air and fresh smoky peat, produces a whisky that is as far removed from a lowland grain variety as you could possibly get. So the next question to answer is, where do we begin on this journey of discovery around the Scottish whisky distilleries? Well, the answer has to be Speyside, where examples of the most traditional Highland malt whisky distilleries can be found in abundance. The climate and geology of the Grampian Mountains, cut through the great glens by the River Spey, is ideal whisky country, and there are any number of distilleries that welcome visitors. Our first port of call is Glenfiddich, home of the best known whiskies in the world. This distinctive whisky is a single malt, which means it is produced purely from this one distillery. Various proof strengths and ages of spirit will have been mixed to give a consistent finished result, and even if you've never tasted a drop of whisky in your life before, this is a very pleasant wee dram to begin with. The first thing that you'll notice here is the sheer size of the operation at Glenfiddich, nestled in the shadow of the ruins of Balvenie Castle. Whisky has been produced here for a very long time, the first spirit flowing on Christmas Day 1887. The man responsible for this great achievement was William Grant, an aspiring shoemaker who had long dreamt of setting up a whisky distillery of his own. Today, Glenfiddich is still a family-owned business with direct descendants of William Grant having a controlling interest. Although technology has advanced dramatically since the first whisky was produced here, the principles behind Glenfiddich remain unaltered. The crystal clear water used in the process still bubbles from the Robbie Doo springs, and the unusually small copper pot stills make the whisky as unique as ever. But you don't have to take my word for it. Step inside and see for yourself how it's done. There's a fine array of pagoda-shaped towers here at Glenfiddich, and these are in fact chimneys of the malt kilns, where the soaked and dried barley is smoked over peaty fires. In the next process, the malt is passed through a mill, emerging as grist. Here you see an enormous mash tun, where the grist is mixed with hot water and agitated. The soluble powdery barley starch dissolves, and the resulting brown, sugary, frothing liquid is known as wort. There is an interesting byproduct of this process, but nothing goes to waste. The husky solid that remains, known as draff, is rich in nutrients and is recycled into cattle feed. After cooling, the wort is transferred to washbacks, which can be made traditionally of wood, as you see here, or stainless steel, as you'll spot in other distilleries a little later. This is the point at which yeast is added to begin the fermentation process, which usually takes about 48 hours to complete. The wash, as it's unromantically termed, is a low alcohol brew about the strength of strong beer. And once you've got to this stage, the serious business of distillation can take place. There is something almost magical about the heart of a distillery, where the great bulbous copper pot stills bubble in steam, and at Glenfiddich the process has changed very little since William Grant designed his first still room. Even with the advent of new materials such as spotlessly clean stainless steel, copper always remains the preferred choice because of its wonderful properties of heat conduction. Now for a little bit of science. Alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water, which means that it will evaporate before the H2O content of the wash. The alcohol in its evaporated state will then condense in cooling pipes, marking the end of the first distillation. In Scotland, the whisky is always distilled twice, distinguishing it from Irish whisky, which undergoes this process 3 times. After the second distillation, it's time to call the shots, and fortunately, modern day distillers do not have to rely on gunpowder to assess the alcohol's strength. However, despite the various gauges and measuring devices available, it still takes an experienced whisky man to make the critical judgment. What you have now is a clear, pure form of alcohol, technically termed ethanol, which is very strong indeed. To make the transition to whisky, the precious distillate must be stored in oak casks for at least 3 years before it can be worthy of the name. And for many whiskies, the maturation process is in fact much longer than this minimum requirement. Here you see a classic Scottish warehouse, where whisky casks are safely stored under lock and key. The wood will impart a rich golden colour, and the pure Scottish air will permeate the casks, developing the flavour, but resulting in a degree of evaporation. This evaporation is whimsically known as the angel's share, because up to 10% of the whisky can be lost in this fashion. And the minute you walk in through the door, you can certainly smell the delicious aroma of whisky on the cold Highland air. For visitors that can make it in person to Glenfiddich, the tour of the distillery is completed in the bottling plant, a mesmerising spectacle and quite unique, as this is one of the few distilleries today that bottle on site. However, no visit would be complete without a wee dram of whiskey to raise your spirits, and you'll not be disappointed. Fear not though, you can sample the fine flavours of Glenfiddich the world over. Just look out for the distinctive label and you'll be in for a rare treat. Having now acquired a good basic understanding of how whisky is actually made, it would be most remiss not to stop and take a closer look at the nearby Speyside cooperage, where traditional craftsmen make and repair oak casks, supplying their Scotch whisky making neighbours. All the casks are made of oak, with 97% of the wood imported from North America. This is a light variety that is a firm favourite because of its elegant and delicate flavouring properties, preferred by the makers of specialist malts. Many distillers utilise casks that have previously been used for sherry, which adds another flavour to the finished whisky, and a lot of the work done here at the cooperage includes restoring these old treasures, as most of the casks will have an incredible lifespan of up to 60 years. It's not only the whisky that improves with keeping. The casks age rather gracefully as well. When they can finally be repaired no further, the cask wood is much sought after by the smoked salmon industry. By using old whisky cask wood chippings in the smokehouses, the flavour imparted to the fish is very special indeed. Travelling through the Speyside region will reveal many distilleries, and the remoteness of some of them is truly fascinating. It's hardly surprising that the job of the excise man in ages past was such a difficult one. Not only were the native Highlanders violently resistant to any interference in their whisky-making activities, they were also pretty difficult to track down in such an inaccessible and inhospitable country. Yet the historic events of the mid-18th century were to transform the social and geographic landscape forever. Bonnie Prince Charlie and his Jacobite rebels cut romantic and dashing figures when they attempted to liberate Scotland from the British Isles when King George II occupied the throne. They came close to succeeding, storming towards London, getting as far as Derby. However, the Bonnie Prince's poor military strategy cost them dear, and the rebellion died with thousands of Scotsmen on the bloody battlefield at Culloden Moor. Charlie was more fortunate than most of his compatriots and fled to the Isle of Skye, disguised as the serving maid of Flora MacDonald, who provided the defeated prince with safe passage rowing him safely across the stormy sea. The whole incident is the stuff of romantic legend and is recorded for posterity in the wonderfully haunting Skye boat song.
Bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the seas to Skye.
Loud the winds howl, loud the waves roar, thunderclaps rend the air. Baffled our foes stand by the shore, follow they will not dare.
Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to Skye.
Though the waves leap, soft shall you sleep, ocean's royal bed. Rocked in the deep, Flora will keep watch by your weary head.
Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. The lad that's born to be king, over the sea to Skye.
Many is the lad fought on that day, well the claymore could wield. When the night came, silently lay, dead at Culloden's feet.
Speed, bonny boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the seas to Skye.
Burned are our homes, exile and death, scattered the royal men. Yet o'er the sword, cool in the sheet, Charlie will come again.
Sweep on the boat, like a bird on the wing, onward the sailors cry. Carry the lad that's born to be king, over the sea to Skye. Over the sea to Skye.
Eventually, the Bonnie Prince escaped to France, and the people of Scotland were left to face the anger of the British Army. The reprisals were brutal, as the government had been shocked by the ferocity and power of the Scottish rebels. No mercy was shown, as the soldiers of the Crown were dispatched to ensure that the wild Scots rebels would never be able to rise up again. As well as banning the wearing of traditional tartan and the playing of the bagpipes, a huge road building plan was instigated to make sure that even the remotest pockets of rebellion could be reached. This is Tomintoul, one of the highest villages in Scotland at 1,124 feet, and you can see the road building handiwork of the British government. It was repression for the native Scots, and worse still, the roads made life much easier for the hated English customs men, who could now hunt down the illegal Highland distillers with much greater efficiency. Between Glenfiddich and Tomintoul, you'll find yourself in the Glenlivet Valley, and in the aftermath of the Jacobite Rebellion, a supporter of the Bonnie Prince changed his name from Gow to Smith in order to avoid the reprisals of the British Army. A farmer by day, Mr. Smith ran one of the 200 or more illicit stills in the district at night. Whisky making was in the blood, and successive generations of Smiths continued the moonshine tradition until George Smith, the grandson of the ex-Mr. Gow, went legitimate and was the first to apply for a licence in this part of Scotland. You're looking at Minmoor House, which George Smith built right next to his Glenlivet distillery, to be on hand in case of trouble, and by all accounts, there was plenty. The whisky distilling neighbours of Glenlivet despised Smith for selling out to the hated English customs men, and they attacked the distillery and his person at every possible opportunity. In fact, George Smith is reputed to have carried 2 pistols with him wherever he went, even sleeping with them at the ready under his pillow. Today, the Glenlivet distillery stands proud and isolated in the Scottish countryside, still producing the fine whisky that George Smith took so many life-threatening risks to promote. With one of the first licences, he had access to the highly lucrative English export market, and even the then reigning monarch, King George IV himself, stated a preference for Glenlivet whisky. Incidentally, this whisky is always prefixed the Glenlivet, as many of George Smith's envious neighbours tried to cash in on his success by calling their whiskies Glenlivet as well. To this day, the legal ruling that George Smith won in court means that only his company is entitled to use the direct article in the whisky's name. From a tasting point of view, the Glenlivet is a subtly balanced malt that is quite light in aroma, with traces of fruit and floral notes. The flavours are actually deeply complex, combining sweetness and dryness, and even the most experienced whisky connoisseur will appreciate this most delightful and historic of whiskies. It would be accurate to describe Glenfiddich and Glenlivet as 2 of the big guns of the Speyside whisky region, but our next destination is a perfect example of a slightly smaller and more intimate operation. Welcome to Glenfarclas, home of one of the strongest whiskies that you'll find on sale. The Glenfarclas 105 cask strength coming in at a mighty 60% proof. This is serious whisky, and probably not advisable for the novice, with a deep, peaty flavour and a kick like a mule. Yet, if you're looking for something a little more challenging, this whisky is divine, and a wonderful Speyside treasure well worth discovering. Glenfarclas, like Glenfiddich, is still a family concern. Originated by J and G Grant in 1865, but these Grants were no relation to the Glenfiddich Grants. Today the MD is a 4th generation Grant, and as his son has in recent years joined the team here, it looks like the family tradition is set to continue. Anyone who suggests to a Speyside whisky maker that water is just water will be re-educated pretty sharply, and given a swift lesson in the properties of aquavitae in this part of the country. This is certainly true at Glenfarclas, where the crystal clear mountain streams run directly to the site. There are traces of peat, granite and aromatic heather in the water, and this all adds character to the finished whisky. The warehouses here are open to the fine mountain air, and it's indeed a privilege to step inside and detect the angel's share in the atmosphere. Some of these warehouses date back to the 1880s, and certain of the casks here have an equally spectacular vintage pedigree of their own. Nothing compares to a wee dram pulled direct from the cask, but this is one tradition that has been consigned to the history books due to complex taxation rules. No whisky is allowed to leave these bonded warehouses in any shape or form, including that which might have been consumed by over-enthusiastic visitors. However, there are plenty of places in Speyside where you can enjoy sampling the great whiskies of Scotland, and there's nowhere better than the Delnashow Hotel, an old cattle drover's inn where a remarkable number of whiskies are always available. Now, when it comes to tasting the various whiskies of Scotland, there are certain things that you need to consider. Firstly, the smell of the whisky is very important indeed, and taking a good sniff before swallowing will heighten your appreciation of whisky greatly. Generally, you will find aromas that are spicy, fruity, flowery, or peaty, but folk tend to come up with as many unique descriptions of these impressions as there are whiskies available to try. If you take your whisky in one of these specialist glasses, you'll find it easier to detect the various aromas than if you use a more traditional highball tumbler. If you were going to offer curry to someone who had never tried it before, you wouldn't give them a red-hot vindaloo. A mild creamy korma would be a much better option, and there would be no danger of putting the recipient off curry for life. The same is equally true when it comes to tasting whisky. Do a little research and start with something that is gentle and mellow. When people say that whisky is an acquired taste, they're absolutely right, and you might be surprised at the flavours you can detect with a bit of practice. Commonly, fruit, honey, malt and peat are noted, but you will hear such unexpected tastes as chocolate and grass mentioned, so do keep an open mind if you want to get the most out of your wee dram. As important in the understanding of whisky as the smell and the taste is the after effects, and this doesn't mean whether you can walk home in a straight line or not. With whisky, there is always an aftertaste, or finish as it's usually termed. Again, this is where the novice needs to choose milder whiskies, because the finish of the stronger malts can be quite a shock if you're not used to the drink. Overall though, this is a very pleasant experience, and you can find that the flavours of the whisky become transformed completely in the finish. So, here are a few of the other Speyside favourites that are well worth looking out for. There's not a more romantically named whisky than Cragganmore, with its delicate aroma and smoky finish. The Special Reserve is definitely a winner, as it's as smooth as velvet, heartening the chilliest soul on even the coldest Scottish winter's night. Another great favourite from this region is the produce of the Macallan distillery that matures its whisky in sweet sherry casks. This enriches the flavour, and there is a surprising peachiness to these elegant, smooth and mellow single malts. If you're looking for an ideal dram for a beginner, you'll not go far wrong with the smooth, lighter whisky from Cardew. The silky character is most pleasing with a delicate, sweet flavour. For something just a little different, Arbor Lower is a fine whisky that makes an ideal after-dinner drink. Many lighter malts are more suited as an aperitif, but this smooth, rich, sherried whisky will round off any meal in style. Once you settle yourself down at a Highland hostelry of this quality, you'll be in no hurry to leave. And besides, there's another Scottish delicacy to try alongside your glass of whisky. The haggis is famous all over the world, and quite rightly. This mixture of offal and oatmeal, wrapped traditionally in a sheep's stomach, is often viewed with a measure of suspicion. Some would say that the best time to tackle such a culinary conundrum is when the whisky is flowing, but this truly is a delightful dish that we can promise tastes much nicer than it sounds. When you're offered neeps and tatties to go with your haggis, fear not, this is not some other ghoulish delicacy. It's a wonderful mix of creamy mashed potatoes and turnips. In fact, there could be nothing better to go with your dinner, a perfect accompaniment to Scotland's most traditional meal, washed down, of course, with a wee dram of whisky of your own personal choice.
A jolly beggar man came tripping o'er the plain. He came unto a farmer's door, his lodgings for to gain. The farmer's daughter, she came down to mew him cheek and chin. She said, he is a handsome man, a pray we take him in. We'll go no more roving in the night. We'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving. He would not lie within the barn or yet within the briar, but he would in the corner lie down by the kitchen fire. And a good strong bed was made for him of good clean sheets and hay, and there beside the kitchen fire the jolly beggar lay. We'll go no more roving in the night. We'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving. Farmer's daughter, she came down to bolt the kitchen door, and there she saw the naked beggar standing on the floor. He took the girl in both his arms and to the bed he ran. Kind sir, she said, be easy now, you're breaking our good man. We'll go no more roving in the night. We'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving. Now you are no beggar, you are some gentleman, and you have stole my maidenhead, and I am quite undone. I am the lord, I am the squire, of beggars I be one, and beggars they are robbers all, and you are quite undone. We'll go no more roving in the night. We'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving. We'll go no more roving in the night. We'll go no more roving, let the moon shine so bright. We'll go no more roving.
There are few places in the world today where the great malts of Speyside are not known and loved. But this hasn't always been the case, because for many years exports of this very specialised liquid commodity proved unpopular with anyone not of Scottish ancestry. For the neighbouring English, this was a fiery brew, and even Dr. Johnson, the writer of the first dictionary, described Scotch whisky as being hot stuff. Yet, ironically, it was the intervention of a retired Irish excise man that changed the fortunes of the Scotch whisky export market forever. Anais Coffey went to the major Irish whisky makers with a brilliant new type of still that could produce spirit continuously, in excess of 200 gallons an hour, considerably more than the traditional pot stills. Now, whether it was Coffey's ex-profession as an exciseman that caused distrust, it's impossible to say, but Coffey and his patent still invention were dismissed out of hand. Such whisky giants as Jameson, Powers and Middleton believed that the light-finished grain whisky from the Coffey still was inferior and not fit to even be called whisky, and this is why, to this day, the Irish spell their whisky with an E, to differentiate it from anything that might have been adulterated by Coffey's invention. Rejecting Coffey was a catastrophic error of judgment that was to cost the Irish whisky industry dear. They may well have been right in terms of quality control, but Coffey turned to the Scotch whisky distillers who were not so blinkered as their Irish counterparts. Mellower grain whisky, of the type produced by the Coffey still, had long been produced in the Scottish Lowlands, and the promise of low costs and high profit margins seemed worth investigating. Modern day enthusiasts can still enjoy traditional lowland whisky, and Glenkinchie is a great example of this very different dram. The flavour is quite light and lively, with notes of lemon peel, almonds, and even freshly mown grass. Coffey's invention appealed to the shrewd Scottish distillers, as plenty of the less fierce grain whisky could be produced quickly and cheaply, and they began to blend it with the fiery single malts to create a type of Scotch that was much more widely acceptable. The resulting blending was an instant success, and the Scottish whisky industry became the toast of the world, leaving the Irish most definitely in second place. When you look at Scotch blends, most of the producers own both malt and grain whisky distilleries, giving them absolute control of their product's finished quality. It's interesting to note that a whisky blender uses his sense of smell rather than taste to achieve the perfect balance, and a well-developed, skilled whisky nose is a highly prized possession in this industry. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking that blended whiskies are a poor relation. They are put together with immense care, and for the novice in particular, they are a great starting point. One of the J&B blends actually uses a grand total of 116 malts and 12 grain whiskies to produce its characteristic flavour, which, as you can imagine, takes a great deal of skill indeed. Watch out too for the Johnnie Walker blends. The red, black and blue labels are international standards. Johnnie Walker was a real person, a Kilmarnock grocer, who started blending whisky in the 1820s, and his name certainly lives on for future generations. There are plenty of other fine blends to choose from as well, with characters all their own. Bell's, Haig and the famous Grouse are all well regarded, and if you're just beginning to get a taste for whisky, there's no better place to start when it comes to developing your appreciation of Scotland's national drink. By this stage in the proceedings, you may feel that you have experienced a wide variety of Scotch whiskies, but it truly is impossible to get an accurate picture of the national drink without leaving the mainland. We now need to turn our attention towards the Scottish Islands, where many wee drams of very different character can always be found. That is, of course, if you know where to look. There are 750 major Scottish islands, and the largest of the group, known as the Inner Hebrides, is Skye. For centuries, a ferry was the only way to reach this dramatically magnificent island, but now a road bridge links Skye with the mainland, though this inevitable convenience is considered by some islanders to be a rather mixed blessing. The landscape is always atmospheric, and even in bad weather the mood is awe-inspiring. Here you see Dunvegan Castle, the ancestral seat of the Clan MacLeod, and it isn't difficult to let your imagination take you back centuries in time, as very little about this wild place has changed. Travelling around Skye, there is much to delight the visitor, and quite often where you would least expect to find anything of interest. Modestly unmarked along a narrow winding road stands Kilchrist Church, a beautiful ruin that is completely untouched by modern tourism. It's worth taking a few moments to stop here and consider the harshness of island life in ages past, when even the church struggled to offer sufficient comfort to the hardy folk who populated Skye. But travel a little further around the island and you'll inevitably end up at the Talisker Distillery, where liquid comfort of a very different nature seemed to cheer the natives' daily lives in more than satisfactory fashion. When this distillery was opened in the 1830s, the local minister denounced it as a great curse for the area, but it nevertheless prospered, and to this day produces a classic island Scotch whisky which is now internationally acclaimed. The sea is an intrinsic part of the Talisker character, and in the early days everything needed for whisky production arrived by boat, and the finished spirit left by the same mode of transport, although the locals did make sure that enough stayed on the island to quench their not insubstantial thirsts. More importantly, you can almost taste the sea in Talisker's unique character. For anyone who has already experienced blended whiskies and the mellower Speyside malts, Talisker is a perfect next step, as it's not quite as fierce as some of the smoky Islay whiskies. Nevertheless, the aroma of Talisker is powerful and pungent, oozing peat smoke, charred heather and rich malty fruit. When it comes to flavour, there is an explosion on the palate, with fruity sweetness balanced with a salty edge and even a tinge of pepper in the finish. Perhaps the most appropriate description of Talisker is as the lava of the Coolins, Skye's wild mountain range, and it's definitely a whisky that needs to go on everyone's must-try list. And if you can get to the Isle of Skye to try it in situ, then all the better.
Oh, the summer time is coming, and the leaves are sweetly turning, and the wild mountain thyme all around the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all across the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? I will build my lover bower by yon cool crystal fountain, and on it I will pile all the flowers of the mountain. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all across the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? I will range through the wild and the deep glens sae dreary, and return with my spoils to the bower of my dearie. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together through the wild mountain thymes, all across the purple heather. Will ye go, lassie, go? If my true love, she were gone, then I'd surely find another. When the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather, will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all across the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all across the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? 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 Will you go, lassie, go?
Moving on from Skye, our next destination is Islay, the most southerly of the Western Isles, and it is rich in historic character. The Kildattan Cross is one of the most impressive 8th century Celtic constructions of this type to be found anywhere in Britain. And a visit to Finlaggan, the medieval stronghold of the Lords of the Isles, is well worth the pleasant walk to what is today a fascinating archaeological site. The wildlife is very special here too, where nature truly is in a class of its own. Where else could you have an intimate tete-a-tete with a Highland cow before moving on to spend a happy hour seal spotting? The seals are completely unfazed by considerate humans, and if you're quiet, you can get surprisingly close to these wonderful creatures, enjoying a spot of sunbathing on a glorious Scottish summer's day. Now, if your taste buds are feeling a little fragile after the Talisker, you might be hesitant at trying the world-renowned Islay fiery single malts. But Scotch whisky is always full of surprises, and the spirit produced at the Bowmore distillery, our first port of call here, is a very gentle introduction to the sometimes intimidating Islay malts. The little town of Bowmore is Georgian in origin, and the distillery dates from 1779, making it the oldest legal whisky producer on Islay. The island is a mere 25 miles long by 25 miles wide, and there are today 7 distilleries in full production. Whisky here is serious business, and the export trade from Islay malts raises huge sums of money not only for the distilleries but also for the British government in liquor taxes, and Bowmore certainly has a widely appreciative clientele all over the world. One of the greatest treasures at Bowmore is the magnificent malting floor, where visitors can see the traditional process in action. Few distilleries today malt their own barley, buying it in ready prepared, and the skill of the maltman is a treasured commodity. Keeping the vast quantities of barley at an even temperature is vital, and it needs to be turned regularly, day and night, to prevent pockets of grain from overheating and germinating too quickly. When the first stage is complete, the green malt, as it's described, is dried in the kiln for 21 hours. As you're travelling around Islay, you may wonder what the strange excavations that you see along the roadside are all about. But this is traditional peat cutting, and absolutely crucial to the character of Islay whisky. In the kiln, peat fires are used to dry the malt for 15 of the 21 hours, with hot air blasts used to complete the process. Yet the whisky men of Bowmore don't need complicated equipment or timers to tell them when each stage is complete. These are genuine craftsmen who feel, smell and taste during this wonderful whisky's manufacturing, and patience is most definitely a virtue that they have in abundance, particularly when it comes to the careful maturation process. The casks used for storage are sherry wood, adding an extra depth to the flavour of Bowmore whisky, and it is kept for the allocated time spans in old warehouses along the sea wall, with a labyrinth of dark, mysterious cellars actually below sea level. At the end of what is one of the most fascinating tours of a Scotch whisky distillery, a tasting session is most definitely in order. The aroma of this fabulous whisky is peaty and smoky with a distinct maritime edge, and the flavour has a sweetness to balance the peat character. It has been said that the longer matured Bowmore malts have hints of chocolate and orange, but if you're ever lucky enough to come across any of them, you'd need to decide on that for yourself. While you're gazing out across the water here at Bowmore, it's an appropriate time to mention a few words about the old Bushmills distillery in Northern Ireland, where the angular pillars of the Giant's Causeway jut dramatically through the coastline just 16 miles over the sea. Throughout this programme, we've talked quite a bit about the differences between Irish and Scotch whiskies, but there are distinct similarities between the mellowness of both Bushmills and Bowmore, which is hardly surprising when you realise how close the two distilleries are, despite the fact that they have different nationalities. For anyone who enjoys the smoothness of Irish whisky, be it Jameson, Middleton or even the mighty Bushmills Black Bush, Bowmore is a great place to begin an appreciation of the Scotch variety. After all, there's nothing to stop anyone from enjoying both the Scottish and the Irish versions of this wonderful drink that has enriched the lives of countless connoisseurs throughout the ages. After tasting the mellow highlights of Bowmore, you could be forgiven for thinking that the fiery reputation of the Islay malts was rather overstated, but you'd better reserve judgment until after a visit to Lagavulin. If you want peaty, smoky whisky that puts the smell of the sea in your nostrils, then this is the brew for you. Even the location of Lagavulin is dramatic, between the main road and the shores of an atmospheric bay. This distillery actually dates officially, in legal terms, from the 1810s, but this was the heart of moonshine country, and the islanders were active making whisky here from the 1740s. It was the perfect spot from which to smuggle whisky to the mainland, and looking at this view, you can understand why it was such a perfect location. Don't shy away from Lagavulin. Those who enjoy this characterful whisky absolutely love it, with a passion that only a challenging spirit of this magnitude can create. It's perhaps advisable to taste a shot of Lagavulin before investing in a whole bottle, as it's understandably expensive. Quality always is, but the rewards will be their own justification should Lagavulin end up on your favourites list. For most whisky connoisseurs, Lagavulin is the epitome of an Islay malt, with Bowmore being the perfect answer for anyone who'd like a slightly gentler interpretation of the experience. However, before you leave the island, a trip to the more northerly port of Skye and the rather isolated Bunarvin distillery is well worth the effort. The strange-looking spelling, with an abundance of consonants, is actually pronounced Bunarvin, which can be quite misleading when you hear people talking about this rather mellow, surprisingly light whisky. Like its fellow Islay malts, Bunarvin does have a characteristic saltiness imparted by its wonderful location at the sea's edge, but that's where the similarities end. This whisky has only a light smokiness, with plenty of sweet fruits and even a hint of ginger and almonds on the finish. Bunarvin is a more unusual Islay malt, and deserves to be better known than it actually is. Those who love the peaty strength of the more famous Islay whiskies tend to dismiss this more delicate spirit out of hand, and folk who are not so fond of the peat and would really appreciate these subtler flavours are afraid to try it because of the fierce reputation of whiskies from the island. However, this does illustrate precisely why it's better to not have too many preconceptions about Scotch whisky, because you can truly miss out on some real treasures if you're not careful, and hopefully this programme will have given you the incentive to taste as many Scotch whiskies as you possibly can.
Oh, rattling, roaring Willie, oh, he held to the fair port to sell his fiddle and buy some other where a cotton with his fiddle, a tear was in his eye. Rattling, roaring Willie, oh, welcome him to me. Oh, Willie, come sell your fiddle, oh, sell your fiddle so fine. Oh, Willie, come sell your fiddle and buy a pint of wine. If I were to sell me fiddle, the world would think I was mad. Marry your aunt today, oh, me and me fiddle I had. As I came by Crackle and the Canley Kent Ben, or Rattle and Roaring Willie was sitting at John Borden, sitting at John Borden among good company. Rattle and Roaring Willie, you welcome him to me. Oh, will you come sell your fiddle, oh, sell your fiddle so fine. Oh, will you come sell your fiddle and buy a pint of wine. If I were to sell me fiddle, the world would think I was mad. Many your aunt today, a million me fiddle I had.
Having considered the many different categories of Scotch whisky, you may find yourself showing a preference for a particular region. But if you're considering embarking on a Scotch whisky trail of your own, a journey of discovery most heartily to be recommended, make sure you include a wide range of locations to set the whole trip in context. Now, although each distillery handles whisky making in their own unique way, at the end of the day, a pot still is still a pot still, whatever region of this historic nation you happen to be visiting. Just be wary of overdosing on distillery tours and make sure that you take in the full flavour of Scottish heritage, as well as a goodly measure of whisky tasting. A very good place to start a visit to this great nation in search of whisky is the beautiful capital city of Edinburgh, where the magnificent castle dominates the skyline. Statues of Robert the Bruce and Braveheart William Wallace stand guard at the gatehouse, where thousands of visitors pass by each year. Look out for the lovely 12th century St Margaret's Chapel and the Royal Palace, where Scotland's crown jewels and the Stone of Destiny lie in state. The magnificent Montmeg siege gun is quite alarming, particularly when you see the size of the ammunition used. Also, if guns are of interest, be sure to be at the castle for 1 o'clock in the afternoon to enjoy the city's famous time gun being fired. They do say that you can tell the difference between a native of Edinburgh and the visitors when the gun goes off. The former tend to quietly set their watches and go about their business, with the latter, on occasion, running for cover. But fear not, this literally time-honoured tradition does not signal the start of a siege, and it really is an experience not to be missed. However, after such excitement, you'll probably really appreciate a wee dram of whisky, and as you walk across the splendid esplanade to venture down Castle Hill at the beginning of the Royal Mile, you'll immediately come to the Scotch Whisky Heritage Centre, where the whole history of Scotland's national drink is encapsulated in a superb exhibition. Even better, you'll get to do a bit of tasting before you leave, which truly is a wonderful way to start any whisky trail. While you're in the area, you might like to take a more relaxed approach to your whisky drinking, and there is nowhere better to recommend for the purpose than the Sheephead Inn in the lovely village of Duddingston on the outskirts of Edinburgh. This pub is a classic Scottish hostelry dating back to the 1500s, when King James VI, who was also to become James I of England as well, often called in for a wee dram or two, and, if local gossip is to be believed, a few other less reputable pleasures into the bargain. In later years, it's said that bonny Prince Charlie, of Skye boat song fame, spent the night here before the Battle of Preston Pans early in his campaign, when the Jacobite rebels soundly beat the British Army. The atmosphere within these walls is resonant with history, and you can raise your glass in a toast to the great Scots of the past, who'd have enjoyed exactly the same pleasures from a tot of traditional Scotch whisky as you can today. But take care here if the locals invite you to try a game of Skittles. This wonderful traditional pub game is played throughout Great Britain, but the Scots have their own unique way of competing. Something akin to 10-pin bowling, it doesn't matter how much whisky you've consumed, you'll never be sufficiently prepared for the methods used for getting a strike. Nevertheless, it's all great fun, and a pub like the Sheephead Inn will give an added quality to the appreciation of the many fine whiskies on offer across one of the oldest and most traditional Scottish bars that you're ever likely to encounter. Now, while you've been inspired by the fine whiskies of Scotland, it's well worth taking a little time here in Edinburgh to consider the many influential folk throughout the centuries to have extolled the virtues of whisky. Not least of these was the mighty hard to amuse Queen Victoria herself, who was known to appreciate a wee dram of Scotland's national drink. Travel down the Royal Mile from Edinburgh Castle and you'll come to the beautiful historic palace of Holyrood, which is still the official residence of our present monarch when staying in Edinburgh today, where Queen Victoria certainly enjoyed her visits to the city. To quote her journal of 1842, she said, "The impression Edinburgh has made upon us is very great. It is quite beautiful, totally unlike anything else I have seen." What's more, the Queen's love of Scotland extended way beyond the capital city. All the distrust of the wild Scots north of the border by Victoria's royal ancestors because of Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Jacobite uprising evaporated. Scotland became for the great lady a place of retreat where she could truly escape the rigorous duties of monarchy. The castle at Balmoral, at the heart of the Highlands, was a great royal favourite for Queen Victoria and her family, allowing them considerable privacy as they immersed themselves in every aspect of Scottish life, including Her Majesty's taste for a highly respectable drop of malt whisky, when the occasion permitted. For the Queen's subjects in England, from the humblest factory worker to the most elevated aristocrat, wherever Victoria led, they followed. And after years of trying to suppress the northern nation's culture, everything Scottish was at last celebrated as it truly deserved to be. The Scotch whisky industry benefited considerably, as did the manufacturers of tartan, and you'll certainly see if you walk the Royal Mile today plenty of gift shops packed full of the kind of Scottish memorabilia that Queen Victoria would have been delighted with. As well as being able to lay claim to a fine royal connection, Edinburgh can boast a first-class literary heritage, and the best-loved of these Scottish authors mix perfectly with a wee dram or two of the finest whiskies. Robert Burns, the great poet, whose words address the haggis when it is traditionally served on Burns Night, is a national hero. Whisky is served in generous measure alongside, and the melodic accompaniment of the bagpipes completes the effect. If you want to find out more about Robert Burns, head for the wonderful Writers' Museum, tucked away in this atmospheric close just off the Royal Mile. The life and works of Robert Louis Stevenson, who was born in the city, are also featured here, and his swashbuckling novels Treasure Island and Kidnapped are famous the world over. Evidently, Talisker was his particular favourite when it came to whisky, as he even mentions it by name as the king of drinks in his poem The Scotsman's Return from Abroad. Indeed, quite an endorsement for Skye's unique island whisky. It would be impossible to consider the literary greats connected with Edinburgh without making a pilgrimage to Princes Street to see the splendidly ornate Scott Memorial. Sir Walter Scott immortalised Scotland in his wonderfully evocative novels, and an appreciative public certainly made sure that he was commemorated in style after his death. However, for the whisky connoisseur, Sir Walter's fine eloquent words extolling the virtues of the nation of his birth in The Lay of the Last Minstrel can be equally appropriately applied to the golden spirit that is Scotland's best loved drink. O Caledonia, stern and wild, meet nurse for a poetic child, land of brown heath and shaggy wood, land of the mountain and the flood, land of my sires, what mortal hand can e'er untie the filial band that knits me to thy rugged strand? With such stirring eulogies to whisky ringing in your ears, it's time to move on, and from Edinburgh, your travels will take you inevitably northwards, and as you journey on, there are lochs and mountains in abundance to visit, where you can truly appreciate the sentiments of Sir Walter Scott in perfect harmony with the ever-changing landscape. The stunning beauty of Loch Lomond as you head across country for the islands of Islay and Skye is unbeatable for dramatic atmosphere, and even if the weather is not on your side, do stop and enjoy this most famous of Scottish attractions. However, there are many lesser known places where you can leave the well-worn tourist routes and enjoy the true spirit of this wild, untamed countryside. Should you see a sign for an old castle, follow the winding road and who knows what you might discover. This evocative castle, deserted and ruined, can inspire more of an empathy with the brave men of Scotland who breathed their lifeblood into early whisky production than any distillery tour, no matter how cleverly archived and displayed. To truly appreciate great Scotch whisky, you need to experience the history of the distillery exhibitions, and without a doubt, you must also step off the beaten track as well to really understand the rugged character of this wonderful drink. And of course, more important than either of these elements, you must embark on a whisky tasting that will inevitably last your whole life long. There's no way you can come to Scotland for a week, fortnight, or even a month and taste all the whiskies that the country has to offer. The advice is, without hesitation, pace yourself. Start gently and really enjoy learning to love Scotch whisky, because time is on your side. These great distilleries may have installed a modicum of technology to run with the business pressures of the 21st century, but the flavour and character of the whiskies haven't altered at all since the days when William Grant and George Smith created their Glenfiddichs and Glenlivets for the world to enjoy. So, like any good bottle of Scotch whisky, the last drops need to be savoured. And as our programme draws to a close, we retrace our footsteps to Speyside for one last treat. Of all the distilleries we've visited, Strathisla, at the heart of Banffshire in the picturesque town of Keith, is perhaps the most traditional and beautiful of them all. Bathed in the late afternoon sunlight, this historic distillery continues to produce some of the finest Scotch whisky that you'll ever taste, being the home of the mighty Chivas Regal, a classic blend loved the whole world over. If you were to carry away with you a single image of everything that is good about this nation's spirit, liquid or otherwise, then this has to be it. Ancient and modern stand side by side, perfectly blending whisky production with tourism, history, heritage, public relations and marketing. This is the way of the future, and the distilleries of Scotland certainly give a fine, hospitable welcome to the visitors who make the pilgrimage to the Scottish Lowlands, Highlands and Islands in search of the perfect dram. It's a quest that brings its own rewards, and whether you go on the Whiskey Trail in person or experience the very best of Scotland from the comfort of your armchair, you can be sure of one thing: your appetite for whisky will be well and truly whetted. A vast array of Scotch whiskies await you, and to finish, here's a toast to wish you well. Your very good health, or, as they say in Scotland, Sláinte na bha.